An absolutely harrowing and engaging documentary, Touching the Void. A great mountaineering movie. What's this movie about? Why do you think you would like it? A forgotten classic coming up next.
It was the last big mountain face in this range of mountains that hadn't been climbed. There's a great unknown there. What's so compelling is stepping into that unknown.
Touching the Void is a 2003 documentary about a mountaineering pair, two Englishmen, Joe Simpson and Simon Yates, who in the 1980s go to climb in the Andes Mountains, Sulia Grande, and it's the first time anybody's tried to climb this mountain in this particular way of climbing the mountain. The documentary is based on a book by Joe Simpson himself. We know he survived, also Simon Yates has survived, but this is a tale of near-death experience on the mountain and an ethical dilemma that happens when there's a massive accident on the mountain as they're climbing the mountain. The documentary shows us both men being interviewed on camera, along with Richard Hawking, who stayed at the base camp while Simon and Joe tried to climb the mountain. Along with those interviews are reenactments, and the reenactments take up the bulk of the movie. Overlaid on top of them are voiceovers from the people who were involved in the incident, Simon and Joe, and they narrate basically the reenactments for you as they tell the story of their climb up Sulia Grande. I think if you haven't seen the movie, you can stop right here and come back to this video later. Just go watch the movie if you like exciting adventure mountaineering type stories. This one is harrowing and involving. I never get bored of it. I've watched this probably 3 or 4 times, and every single minute I'm absorbed by the movie. I think the storytellers here, especially Joe Simpson, they feel authentic, and they feel like they're not performing for the camera. This is a really felt experience by them, and they still obviously are transformed by what happened to them on the mountain. So let's deal with spoilers now and talk about the entire movie. In one sense, the movie is about the ethical decision that Simon makes to cut free Joe and let him go, and then Simon takes off by himself, goes back to the base camp, and believes that Joe is dead. However, I think the movie more or less justifies Simon completely, or nearly completely. It would be very hard to come out of this movie and say, well, Simon did wrong by what he did. And also he seems to be telling the story honestly. He even says at one point, I thought about making up a story. I thought about inventing lies in order to make myself look good. So it seems like he didn't, and in fact, Joe can verify his experience. So the movie is not necessarily to me about the ethical choice that Simon made. Instead, the movie is about two ambitious young men trying to do something amazing and why they would do it. Second of all, obviously it's a tale of survival, but it's really a tale about dying and coming to grips with dying alone in some remote place in nature. And how would that be? What would it be like? And Joe can basically tell us, although of course he didn't die, he came very close to it. This relates to a book I think everyone should try to read, How We Die, a National Book Award winner. Some stories in here and some biological, physiological description of how and why the body actually dies. But you get more in this movie, a spiritual and psychological description of Joe as he starts to come to grips with the possibility, almost near certainty, that he will die with a broken leg, in severe pain, trauma, he's dehydrated, and what does the mind go through and experience when it realizes, I'm going to die? Obviously, given the title, Touching the Void, this is Joe Simpson's spiritual experience. I use the word spiritual to indicate something that seems to be beyond the physical body itself. Nevertheless, we come to learn that Joe is an atheist and believes in nothing. He says he believes in nothing after death, that when the body dies, that's it. He might be a pure materialist, and maybe this experience on the mountain has made him that, or at least it affirms his views. And once again, another book for you. This is William James's Varieties of Religious Experience, a book well worth perusing through to realize that everyone has a different way of dealing with what life means, and the fact that we're going to die, and throughout life we suffer to some degree, and that's obviously encapsulating this experience with Joe. Having a great accomplishment in the rush of getting to the top of the mountain, and yet failing, enduring severe pain, and realizing he's going to die. What's that like? When Joe's in that crevasse, he says he realizes nothing exists, And the crevasse is perhaps, he doesn't say this, but a metaphor of his vision of what reality is, deep, dark, and black, and there's no light. And of course, this experience is paired with the fact that there's no water, or he can't get water, and he becomes dehydrated more and more as this experience goes on, even though he's surrounded by water, both the mountain containing snow, and then later on when he gets to the glacier, the water underneath the rocks, and yet water is inaccessible to him. And that, of course, is throughout all kinds of religious traditions a spiritual metaphor. Water being able to, cleanse oneself, or the lack of water, maybe a spiritual dryness or deadness, seems to be coming up here inadvertently in this movie. And what does the brain go through when it has to deal with trauma and this near-death experience and being alone and isolated? It's one of Joe's great fears, is dying alone. And he actually says, what's it like? Well, I actually dreamed up some crazy things, and then the brain seems to just come up with nonsense at times, the hallucinations that come up for him. The one that really gets me is the pop song from a band he doesn't like, one I've never personally heard of, and it was entirely forgettable. His brain played the same pop song in loops over and over again. It seemed to be dying. He's lacking water, and he's not going to find somebody down at base camp, or so he thinks. So then it plays this nonsense pop song. It's a very scary thought. Dying alone, and this is what happens to you. I don't blame Joe for feeling what he feels, and the interviews are so honest in this movie. I honestly feel for the guy, and am grateful that he gave his interviews. Nevertheless, we know that Joe survived, and the end screen, the titles in the end say that he survived to actually mountain climb some more, and I really love that he didn't give it up. It's amazing, in fact, and so the movie is a testament to human endurance and perseverance, and the amazing nature of the body itself, the drive to survive, along with Joe actually being active in his survival and trying to help himself out. The idea of going through stages and trying to get somewhere in 20 minutes and beating your record, all that goal setting that Joe does is really curious, but also quite harrowing. If you like this documentary, there's another good mountain climbing documentary, Meru, M-E-R-U. Go check that one out. It's more recent relative to this video's release date, and I think both of these documentaries are really curious, and they make something out of mountaineering. It's not just about the excellence of the achievement of climbing a mountain and the adventure of it. It's more about what are we, who are we, how do we relate to death, and why do we relate to death the way that we do. I think these are very important issues and themes that, all of us have to explore, because we're all going to die. What do you think about this movie? Let us know in the comments. And what do you think about Joe? His really interesting testimony and interviews here. Please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you, and have a great day.